So it's officially a minute past, so I'll get started. So my name is Rob. I'm with Ghost Gear. I'm the founder of Ghost Gear. We have, well, I've got that slides here. So who we are. I really started in 2017, but officially with the LLC started in 2018. I was making little EMF and capacitive touch music boxes. Could not keep up with the demand, so I needed something that was scalable. So I went over to these injection molded. I got a manufacturer that makes them. They mill everything out and then they silk screen it. And then in 2021, just a few years ago, I got two people invested into Ghost Gear. So it was a little cash bump, and then that's why I was able to come up with Piccolo and the Epic Box with their help. They run the marketing side of it, so they hired a marketer to do what they do. We want to provide high quality, affordable ghost hunting tools. And one of the things that we do is the peer review, which is on here. So we do a peer review. I've got 3 other electronics engineers that I pay to peer review our schematics. And what that means is they look at it as an engineer, they break everything down, and then they give you a report that says, you should change this part of it. This would be more efficient, or that kind of stuff. We utilize a peer review process. So I've got 3 independent engineers that do that, and that's just a testament to our dedication, to putting out the best possible bases. So we come up with our own circuit boards. I design the circuit boards. We don't cobble together. So if you opened up one of these, you wouldn't have like 6 or 7 different Arduino components hardwired together. It's just one circuit board. Through that, you get really good battery efficiency. So the batteries that are in these devices are the same batteries that I used in the Tennessee investigation about 4 months ago. So obviously they're off, but I do use them like I'm using them today. I left them on all night last night. I slept here last night with Alan. Yeah, we slept down in the beds. We still let us take a bed, and I had them on sitting next to me to wake me up if something were to happen. I was always curious about that. And so what they're talking about today is motion sensor used in ghost hunting. So I see a lot of devices that say it detects motion, but they don't go into how it detects motions. And a lot of people don't understand there are different ways to detect motion. So that's what we're going to get into. I'm going to cover passive infrared, PIR, ultrasonic motion detection, microwave, and vibration is not technically motion detection, but it does get used on stairs to detect vibration if something's moving up or down. So in a way, it's kind of a motion detector. So passive infrared motion sensors, they scan the area. So there's 2 crystals. Not get ahead of myself here. So there's 2 crystals in there. One reads an outside ring, the other crystal reads the inner ring. And it scans its cone of visibility. And it looks at those 2 rings. And when the infrared signature changes through one, and then it goes back to normal, and it sees that inner one change, it'll throw the alarm. That's how they work. So one of the big issues with them is, it has 2 sensors. I just covered that. One of the issues is the object has to be radiating some kind of heat signature. A PI passive, because it's passive, it does not emit IR and then look for a bounce back because it's passive. There are active PIR sensors that will do that, and it costs a little bit more. But a passive one does not. It requires you to generate the heat signature. It looks at that. So that's one thing to know, because if we're trying to catch spirits, then we need them to generate their own When I say heat, it doesn't always have to be hot, right? Even cold is considered a heat signature because in physics, we don't measure cold, right? So it's a smaller number than a higher hot number, right? But it's still technically heat that we're measuring, and it needs to see that. So if a spirit came in really cold in a hot room, it would detect it, but that thing that it's looking at has to generate its own heat signature. So the pros for these are they're passive devices. Like I said, they do not emit their radiation. They are efficient battery-wise because it doesn't need the juice to emit any kind of radiation to come back. They're widely available. You can get them AliExpress for like $1. They're not terribly expensive. They do provide a fast response time. As soon as something crosses between the outer and the inner, it immediately will trigger on that. The cons are extreme temperature fluctuations or changes in ambient temperature, and that can mean the AC turning on, right, or the heater taking on. That will mess them up and cause them to go off. They'll trigger false alarms, like curtains moving, right, in the hot air, like I just talked about, and then obviously the presence of people. I've seen them used where people have set them off, and they claim they didn't set it off because they believe they were not in the cone that it can see, but that cone goes out wider as you get farther away, right? So if you're closer to it and you're standing in a spot, might not set it off. But if you move farther away from it in that same spot, now you're in the cone of its visibility and will set them off. And they cannot detect distance, so they can only detect motion. You can't get a read out from a low quality one. There are some very high quality ones where you can. Those would be active.
What is the working distance?
The working distance depends on which one that you use. They get up to around 20 feet. They're good for the cheaper ones that you get. You can get some really high quality ones that they fly over, and do aerial mapping with them. Those are the better ones. Where you see these a lot are in these handmade motion boxes that you see being sold on like Facebook or Etsy. They use those quite a bit because they're inexpensive and they're easy to use with an Arduino setup. Arduino is a prototyping platform. It's very easy for someone that doesn't know anything about electronics to get into, and you can use those to build just about anything. They're not good for production, and the reason for that is they're not efficient with the battery. It will drain the battery because it's not meant to be efficient. It's meant for you to prove your concept, and once you prove your concept, then you're supposed to go to a production rate. But you will see a lot of people use them. Arduinos and these music boxes. The next one is ultrasonic motion sensor. These are a little bit better in my opinion because they do detect distance, and the way they work is they send out a chirp, a high pitch we can't hear. Think about a bat, looking for a bug. It sends out a chirp, and then it bounces off of that object and comes back to the receiver. So you've got a sender and a receiver, and comes back, calculates the time, and then that can calculate the distance. They are composed of two components, the emitter and the receiver, and it would be considered an active sensor since it does send out a signal and it reads a signal back. Ultrasonic motion sensors do have some limitations. They have difficulty detecting soft objects because it will absorb some of the sound. And likewise, you can get echo off of a hard surface, and that echo will give you a false positive. So one of the products that's out there is Ghost Stops. That thing's called a tracer. It's meant to set on the floor. So I created a device a while ago called the ultrasonic motion detector. It would read the distance, and it would tell me, hey, I've seen something 12 feet out. I've seen something 8 feet out, right? I built it with a tripod insert for a reason, because when I tested it, all of my devices get tested in the field. When I would test it on that table, like I set it here on this table, I would get a bunch of false positives, and the reason for that is the echo right here. If I moved it out, fine, no problem. Move it back over here, so I'm getting false positives. So my problem with the tracer is it's meant to be set on the floor, and I know that you're going to get echo back up off that floor, and you're going to get all kinds of false positives off of that. So just something to consider when you're looking at some of those devices. So so the receiver picks up the reflected echoes, and then it measures the distance that way. It counts the seconds, not really seconds, milliseconds between the signals. They are active sensors, like I said, because they do actively emit a noise and then they receive that noise. Pros on an ultrasonic motion detector is their relatively long distance range. You can, even in an expensive one, you can get up to 27 feet on them. They are one of the more precise measurements out there as far as calculating distance. And you can adjust the sensitivity on most of them, and you can, like I said, read the distance off of those. And the cons, they are susceptible to false detection. Like I mentioned, echoes will cause the false positives. Other ultrasonic waves could cause them. I had an issue with a guy that complained about my ultrasonic motion detector is always going off. And then when I found out, he sent me a video of using it. He had two of them pointing at each other, like 10 feet away. One set the other off. Thinking about it, right? So that's one thing that we need to be careful of. And other things emit frequencies. And if they emit those frequencies in the frequency range of the ultrasonic motion detector, it'll set that off as well. Commonly used in the original paranormal music box. Everyone knows that it's motion activated, but no one knows how, right? But that one does use ultrasonic motion. And this is my ultrasonic motion detector that I created. You can see the readout on top to give you the numbers of the feet of how far away the object is that it is reading. So next up are microwave sensors. They get used pretty often in the paranormal field. They also send out, but instead of a sound wave, they send out an EMF wave. And it's a very strong EMF wave, and it can actually go through solid objects. So if you were to set a microwave sensor, also known as Doppler radar, you've heard that one before. If you set it next to a door, so you got a door closed, you put it in the door, and somebody moves on the other side of the door, it'll pick that up. And you've got, in the best case situation, you can get up to 21 feet. So you got to be careful. It reads 360, 21 feet out. You got to be careful that you're not setting it off. So it's best to use in an empty room. We'll put it in an empty room. Nobody's in here. You hear it go off. Maybe you want to go investigate in there because it's going off over there. So this talks about the Doppler radar, how that objects moving toward or away from the sensor will shift the frequency. It's called the Doppler effect. It's like when a train is coming at you, it sounds higher pitched, and then when it passes you, it sounds like it's going lower pitch. That's actually known as the Doppler effect. So when it's coming to you, it's pushing those sound waves to be faster. And then as it goes away, it's elongating those sound waves and they sound or lower pitch. So if there's no movement in the sensor's range, the scattered microwave signals, they don't really report anything back. But if it does sense motion and its EM field gets, because it does send up a strong EM field, if that gets disturbed, then that's when it sets off the alarm. So the pros are microwave sensors. They do have a long detection range, so you need to be careful with that. They can penetrate non-metallic materials and pick up signal on the other side. They can detect the slightest movement. So I've seen people try to set still next to one, and it's still picking up. Just didn't read, pick it up. It is an active sensor, not a passive sensor, because it's sending out those waves and reading the frequencies that come back. Now, the cons on these are where the false alarms come into is, again, because it's so sensitive, flying insects can set it off. Uh, Reflections from a metal surface will set it off. I've seen issues with really dusty locations. The dust will set it off. And since it can penetrate through non-metallic materials, caution needs to be taken because, again, maybe you got sitting on a bed that's up against the wall and you think it's just reading the room, but you got an investigator in the room next door that's moving around and it's picking them up. So I created a device called the fan tune. It uses microwave sensing, and it's a music box. So when it detects motion, it will play a little tune. So my last one, it's not directly a motion sensor. It's a vibration sensor, but it's used to detect footsteps on stairs. So it's kind of hybrid motion detector. The way that works is there's two different materials, and the vibration, like a speaker or microphone, really, the vibration will cause it to deflect when the sound pressure gets in it, and when it deflects, it picks that up and throws the alarm. This particular one uses a piezoelectric material, so it's quartz crystal, and that generates a charge through it. And when the other material deflects, it changes that charge. And that's how it detects vibration. The pros on these, they are highly sensitive. They can detect, a good quality one can detect deep breathing. They do provide real-time data. It's almost instant. They are small. You can put it into just about any kind of enclosure. And they're not terribly expensive. The cons are some may not provide detailed information about the direction of vibration. So it's a vibration sensor, but it may only pick up one direction. So X, Y, and Z, right? There are 3 axis vibration detectors that covers all 3, right? But a lot of the less expensive ones only cover one of those. And depending on how you orientate the sensor depicts how, or chooses which plane it's going to vibrate on. So that's one thing to be careful of. And they do require some calibration on it. That's where the better sensors come in, because you can calibrate those. The cheaper sensors, you can't really actively calibrate them. So over time, they drift, what's known as a drift, and they become harder to set off when they drift. They don't usually go in a way that makes them easier to set off. Temperature, humidity, electromagnetic EMF can affect the accuracy of the vibration sensor because that's where it affects the surface materials on the piezoelectric. It makes it easier or harder for it to deflect.
Yeah, with that probably.
Sensor quality. So that's where I got into, some sensors are more expensive than others. And there's a reason for that, because they're just a better sensor, right? And they usually are designed to do a specific job. So down here, I've got 2 sensors. They're both microwave sensors. One is $8.90, the other one's almost $80, right? So out of those 2, I think you can figure out which is the better sensor. But when you're designing something, you have to also ask, what level do I need this sensor to be at? Is an $80 sensor really required for what I'm making, or is it, a $2 sensor off of AliExpress acceptable? And that leads into my next question, which I probably will get a lot of flack for. I hate these things. So think about this. You can buy these for like $1. So they probably cost the manufacturer 20 cents to make. When they were picking up the motion sensors and all the electronics, they were going for the cheapest that they could get. Now, what is its intended use, right? It is to get a cat to play with it, right? So would it be okay for a false positive to happen? Yeah. Right. It might even be a good thing, right? The cat stopped playing with it, forgot about it, and it lights up and the cats are fine again. All right. So it might be a positive. Um, so the precision and accuracy, really low, right, for that. And that's one thing I think people need to think about when they're buying this, any kind of equipment, whether you're buying Etsy, Facebook, a cat ball. You know, think about what kind of, what quality, what level of accuracy that they're going for, right? Most of the time, they're buying the cheap sensor of AliExpress. You can get them for a couple bucks. And they got an Arduino in there, they wire it all up, and that's what they sell. So when you do that, you're prone to a couple of things. One, battery life expectancy is going to be low because Arduino's just, they're not designed to, they're not meant for battery efficiency. They're just meant for prototyping for a, what we call concept, proof of concept, right? And most people are going to use those sensors. So again, that's something to always be mindful of when you're buying this stuff. Put on a critical thinking cap and ask yourself, would this be prone to, a lot of false positives? Which I believe the cat ball. I actually believe the cat ball is designed when they're not playing with it to go off, to get the cat's attention again. That's what you would want to have. When you play with this, play with it. If they stop playing with it, it goes off, right? The cat starts playing. Yeah. So that is it for my presentation. Open it up to questions.